Hi, this is PG of PG's Lumacy. In this tutorial, we will be making Dear Daniel from the Sanrio character series made on the extended Rainbow Loom. For the bands, we will be using white and ocean blue. And we need a few pieces of black, turquoise, and a piece of a yellow rubber band for the nose. We will be using an extended loom that is 5 pin bars wide, and then we will be using the hook. You can use the plastic hook that came with your original kit, or it's better to have a metal hook for the heavier layers of bands. We will be using white and black seed beads for some features of this project. And if you choose to use seed beads, you will need a piece of floss to string the seed beads with rubber bands. It's good to have a fine crochet hook and a pair of tweezers for the finer details of this project. Let us prepare the seed beads that we need for this project. For the eyes, we will be stringing 2 black seed beads with a white rubber band. To do that, we get a piece of floss that is reinforced on one end and insert that floss into the beads. And then get your single white band onto the floss and then reinsert the floss into the seed beads. That will form a loop that will pull your band into the seed beads. And this is the piece that we need for the eyes. For the buttons on Dear Daniel's overalls, we will use the same technique. This time we will use a white bead, and then we will use an ocean blue rubber band. And we get our ocean blue band into the seed bead. And we only need 1 bead on a blue band. Pause the video or rewind it to make the other piece for the button. If you do not like to use seed beads, you could substitute this piece for the eyes with black bands looped 4 times and then strung with the white band. And for the button, you could use a white band looped 4 times strung with a blue band. It will not look as good, but it will do the job. Let us lay out our bands and take note that our extended loom is 5 pin bars wide, and it is in the rectangle configuration, which means that the pins are aligned. Make sure that the arrows are pointing downwards or pointing towards you. We will start our layout from this second from the top pin, and we will be working on these center pins. Unless otherwise specified, we will be using double bands for this project. Okay, so let's place 2 white bands on these center pins, and then 2 horizontal bands on these pins, and then let's do that on the other side as well. Then let us add diagonal bands on these 2 pins. And then let's do that on the other side as well. Let us add a single band on these 2 pins on the right and on the left side as well. A single white band on this side. Now let us place diagonal bands on these 2 pins. And let us do that on the other side as well. Let us add vertical bands on these pins on the right, and we will do that on the left as well. Now let us add the bands for the ears. Okay. And remember that you need to place the bands in the exact same order that I am placing them on the loom. Okay, let's work on the pieces for the ears. Let us place vertical bands on these pins, top right, and then diagonal bands on these pins. And then we will place a capping band on this pin wrapped 4 times. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let us do that on the other side. Vertical band, diagonal band, and a capping band looped 4 times. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let us add a row of double bands on these pins. It is a good habit to push down on the bands to make room for the other bands that we will be adding to them. Let us place another row of white double bands on these pins. Next, let us add horizontal bands on this row, and we will start with the outer pins. Okay. Let's place a horizontal band on this side and horizontal bands on this side. Then we will place horizontal bands on the inner pins. Let us work on the body of the figure. First, we will place 2 turquoise bands on these center pins. Then, we will place diagonal bands on these pins. Next, we will add a row of ocean blue bands on these pins, but for the side pins, we will be using the blue bands with the white seed beads on them. Okay, so we will place 1 of those bands on this side, and then we will add a band without a seed bead on top of that. So it will still be a double band placement, but one of the bands has a seed bead. Let's do that on this other side. The band with the seed bead plus a band without a seed bead. Then we will place double bands on the center pins. Now let us add a row of blue bands on these 3 center pins. Then on the sides, we will add diagonal bands. Let us add a row of double blue bands on this row. Then let us add vertical bands on these two pins and on these two pins. Then on these two pins, let us add a diagonal pair of bands. And do that on the other side as well. On these outer pins, we will also be adding diagonal bands. Let's add the leg pieces. Let's use 2 white bands and then 4 white bands, and we will put a capping band on this pin wrapped 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. Let us do that for the other leg. 2 bands, 4 bands, and a capping band looped 3 times. 1, 2, 3. We can use these empty pins to make the arms. So let us make the arms. First, let us have 3 turquoise bands on these pins, and then 2 white bands on the next pins, and then 3 white bands on the next pins. And then we will add a cap band or capping band on this pin wrapped 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. Let us loop these pieces. Okay, then get it out of the loom. And then go to this section over here. This is what I call the shoulder pin, and place the arm piece that we made on this shoulder pin. Like so. Now pause or rewind the video to make another arm piece, and then we will add it to this pin. So those are the pieces for the arms. Let us add horizontal bands that will hold the vertical bands together and also help define the shape for our figure. For this row of bands, let us add a single blue band and place it across all the pins in that row. And for this row of pins, we will be placing a single band, and then we will loop that band on this center pin and then pull it all the way to this pin on the end. And I call this a 1 1/3 looped band. For the head area, we will be placing a single white band on all 5 pins on this row. And for this row, we will not be adding a horizontal band per se, because we will be adding the piece that we made for the eyes, and it will serve as a horizontal band that will also hold the pieces together. So we will place this eye piece on this row, and we will place the ends on these side pins. Make sure that the band holding the eyes is on the bottom ends of these pins and not on the top. And you could bring the beads all the way to this section over here. So this is how the layout will look like after we have placed all the bands. You might want to pause the video and compare your work with the one on the screen. We are now ready to loop the bands, and we will start with the legs. Go into this capping band and grab all the 4 bands and hold on to the capping band. Okay, because see what happens when we don't hold on to it, it slips off. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, let's do that for the other leg. What happened there was that one of my bands slipped off the hook, so I had to go and make sure I got all the 4 bands. It's a bit of a challenge when you are dealing with a lot of bands in one placement. Okay, then loop the double bands. Okay, now let's work on the coveralls and the shirt. When you get to this section, you start with the outer bands first. Okay, up to here, and then go to the other side. Okay, and then go for these diagonal bands. Okay, now let us loop the rest of these bands. You will notice that I stopped at this section over here. Okay, now let us loop these bands. Okay, this would be a good time to get the bead to the front. So go into this pin and onto those loops, okay, and get the bead to the front. Like so. This will be easier to do when the bands are still on the loom. Okay, so let's do that for the other side. Loop the bands, and then get the bead out to the front. Like so. Okay, and then loop this middle band. Now when you get to this section over here, loop the diagonal bands first, and then loop this turquoise bands last. Now when you get to this section over here, we will want to loop these horizontal bands first. And we will get the band that's on top, and in my case it would be this pair of bands. So grab them and then loop them onto this side pin. And it will help to get a crochet hook and use the bottom end of it to release the bands. Okay, now let us grab these bands. Then let us loop these horizontal bands. And we loop them to the side pins as well. Okay, then let us loop this row of vertical bands. Now before we loop these bands on this row, let us add the nose piece on this pin, and that will be a yellow single band. So we loop it twice on this pin in the center. Okay, it's looped twice. And then we loop this center bands, the forward pin. And then we release the yellow band from this pin, and it goes to the white bands. Okay, let us loop these 4 pairs. Now when we get to this top section over here, I would like to add a feature on Dear Daniel, and that would be the hair on top of his head. And it's up to you whether you wanted to use black for those hair pieces, or you can also use white. I think the black looks better than the white, since it's seen more, it's more visible. So it's up to you what color of bands you wanted to use for the hair pieces on top of his head. But I would like to go to the bottom of the loom to make that hair piece. Get 3 black bands and 2 white bands. And I want to stretch out my black bands a bit just so they're more manageable. And one at a time, we will loop these black bands on this pin 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's one of the bands. Then grab the next one. 1, 2, 3. Then grab the next one. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Then grab your 2 white bands and stretch them out a bit. Makes them more manageable. And then go into this pin, into the black bands, and then get your white band into the black bands. Okay, then secure, and then pull these black bands off the pin, and you will get this piece. And we will go back to the top of the loom, and we will place the white bands onto this pin and onto this pin. Okay, so it's on these 2 pins, and then we put them to the top side of this center pin. Now, to make it easier to loop these top bands, I want to get the hair pieces out of the way. So what I do, while holding on to this middle piece, I loop this black band onto this pin. Okay? Then I loop the other band onto this pin. Okay? And for this center band, I get 2 of them, 2 of the loops. I loop to this pin, and one of the loops I loop to this pin. So you will see later on why we're doing this. It just makes it easier to manage that hair piece. Okay, so now let us loop the bands on this section. Take note of the order in which we do that. Okay, let's start with this side. First, let us loop the bands for the ears. Okay, and we will be looping in the opposite direction from this pin to this pin. Okay, go into the cap band, grab the double bands, diagonal bands, get them out of the pin, and then loop to this pin. Okay, now go for these bands, get them out of the pin, and loop to this pin. Now let us go for these bands, go into this pin. Okay, and then loop to this pin. Now go for this single band. Do you remember the single band that we placed on this side? Go for that single band, grab it from underneath, get it out of the pin, and then loop to this pin. And now we're going for these bands, go into this pin, and then loop to this pin. Okay, you have to do it in that exact order so you will get the desired shape. Let's do that again on the other side. Okay, let's go for these diagonal bands from the earpiece. Hold on to the capping band and then get the bands out of the pin and then loop to this pin. Now go for these bands, get them out of the pin and loop to this pin. Okay, now we'll go for these bands, loop to this pin. Now let's go for this single band, loop to this pin. Now let's go for this diagonal band, loop to that pin. Okay. Now let us go for these diagonal bands. Okay. Go for this band and then these diagonal bands. Now let us go for these horizontal bands. Okay, so we grab them from this heavy layer of bands. It's good to look at it from the side, so you will see where you're going. Okay, grab them and then loop to this center pin. Now let's do that again for this other side. Okay. Get it out of the pin and then loop to this center pin. And lastly, this band in the center. It's easy to forget to loop this pair of bands because it's somewhat hidden, but make sure you loop it or else your piece will fall apart. So grab it from underneath and loop to this center pin. Okay, so now we are ready to secure the bands on the top, and we will go into this pin. It's a heavy arrangement of bands. We go into all the bands like so, and then get our single band onto the hook and then pull it out and it just broke on me. Okay, so grab another one. And pull it out. Okay, and then we want to have this band into this band that I have in my hands right now. We want the band holding the hair piece into it as well. So make sure you don't go through here, but you go through here to get all of those bands. Okay, and then you secure. Then you release these black bands very carefully. You don't want them getting all twisted up. Okay, and then secure. And we are now ready to pull this entire piece off the loom. I will be using the bottom end of a crochet hook to pry the heavy layers of bands off the loom so that we will avoid breaking the bands. whenever you feel any resistance from the bands while pulling them off the loom, use the end of a crochet hook to pry them out, and don't force them, so that you will avoid breaking your bands. Okay, so let us finish this project. You will see that you see the shape, the look of Dear Daniel already, but let us fine tune our piece. Okay, first pull these ear pieces upwards. Okay, and then stretch the bands sidewards like this. We want a head shape that is roundish, but at the same time it will not be a circle, it will be an oblong shape. Okay, I am pulling one end of the yellow nose piece from the back, so that we will only have a small shape, a small portion of it showing from the front for the nose. Okay, and then for these hair pieces, I grab all the loops and place them on my hook, and then pull them as much as I can without breaking. Okay. Then I will determine which the center loop is, and I think it would be this loop over here. What I do is I go into this band. It has 2 loops on it. Okay, I go into this white band and then pull the middle loop from the black bands in. You can skip this if you like, but okay, I just don't want a gap in the hair pieces. Okay, so get it in there. Okay, now I even out the stretching on my bands for the hair piece. Okay, pull them as much as you can without breaking, and then pull out the hook very carefully so that your bands will not be twisted up. And you can also pull on the bands individually so you can balance the stretch on them. Okay, you don't want a loop sticking out. Okay, so that is what we want to happen on these hair pieces on the top of the head. Okay, so keep on working until you even out the stretching on these hair pieces. Okay, I'll leave that to you. Then for the eyes, get them to this section over here. Then stretch out your piece. You want a roundish shape. I might actually have to update my Hello Kitty tutorial based on this Dear Daniel tutorial, since I like the shape of the head for this better. Okay, this is the original Hello Kitty from the original tutorial, and the head is rather too flat for me, so I might update that tutorial in the near future just to match Dear Daniel. Okay, so work on you want the beads, the white beads near the top. Okay. Okay, stretch them out. For the legs, once again, we want them to be pointing forward. So pull on these bands from the back that are holding the legs. And the legs will point forward like so. I've already mentioned in an earlier video that I want my Sanrio series characters to all be in a seated position. Okay, now let us add the whiskers. For the whiskers, we will be using black bands. The most complaints and rants that I got from the original Hello Kitty tutorial was the difficulty in making the whiskers. So I came up with an easier way to place the whiskers, but the caveat is that it is not as neat as the original design. Okay, let me show that to you, and it's up to you to decide whether you wanted to use the original technique in the original video or use this new technique. Okay, so you see that I am stretching out my black bands as much as I can without breaking them, okay, because that will make them more manageable. Okay, then I cut like so. Okay, so that gives me 3 pieces of cut black bands. Now let us go to the back side of the figure, and it'll be easier to use a fine crochet hook for this, but if you don't have a fine crochet hook, the Rainbow Loom hook will be all right. Okay, so what I do is I get my 3 pieces into this section over here. Okay, this section in between these 2 bands, okay, near the eyes. Okay, so to do that, I go to the back side and insert my hook into this section, and then get it out of this section over here, like so. And then I get my bands, my 3 single bands, and then I get them into this spot. Okay, actually, the Rainbow Loom hook will be better for this. So let's do that again. Go into this spot over here and get out of this spot over here in between the 2 bands. Get your black bands, okay, and then get them into that spot, like so. Okay, so one end is in the front and one end is in the back. Okay, now for the ends in the back, you tuck them into this band. Okay, so I grab them and I tuck them into this band. You can do it 1 band at a time, all 3 bands at the same time. Okay. Okay, so we tuck them into this band over here to hold them securely. Okay, now we turn, and then one by one, okay, let us position our whiskers. Okay, lay them neatly. Like so. Okay, this one on the top. Okay, this is where you can use your fine crochet hook. This one on the top, it goes into here. Okay, grab it into this spot over here. Like so. This bottom one, okay, this bottom piece, it goes like this. Okay, so we are sending it to this section over here. Okay. Like so. And then the middle one, it goes like this. So we are sending it to this spot over here. Okay. And then make sure there's some slack. Okay, that it's not pulling into the face piece too much. Okay. You will see this top piece, it's sliding down to here. So you might want to get it out of there and then get it to this spot over here so that it's not sliding down. Okay. So this is something that you have to do by ear, so to speak. Okay. Get them into the spot where they will not be sliding out of position. Okay. Okay, now that you're good with this side, we will go to the back side and we will get our end pieces to the same spot. Just for a neat appearance, we will get it to the same spot where the other ends are at. So we'll tuck them in there. Okay, this one. Okay, I'll get it through here so it'll be neater, and then tuck it in here. Okay, and then this middle piece, I'll make sure there's some slack, and then I'll tuck it in here too. Like so. Okay, so you will see that the whiskers are now in place, and I think this is an easier method compared to the one that I used in the original Hello Kitty tutorial. You can do that on the other side as well. So I have placed the whiskers on the other side, and now for finishing this up, okay, you will just tuck in these end pieces as much as you can to hide them. Okay. Just tuck them in wherever you can so that they'll be hidden. So I leave that up to you, how neat or how unfinished you want your final product to be. Okay. I'll just keep on tucking in these end pieces that will secure them. Like I said, it is not as neat as the one with the whiskers as it was done in the original tutorial. I used the technique for the original tutorial on this one, and you will see that it's neat even from the back. For this new technique, it's easier to do. It looks neat out front, but in the back it's kind of a mess. So it's up to you what you would like to do. If you want to see the original technique for this, find the Hello Kitty tutorial, either for the single loom or for the extended loom. So there you have it. Dear Daniel from the Sanrio Characters series, made on the extended loom.